It's two brothers teaching truth, fighting false doctrine and priestcraft in the last days. And it's two brothers. It's just two brothers.
This is the Two Brothers.
Two brothers. Welcome to Two Brothers.
All right, we're here with a video for everybody. We've got our voice modulizers ready. Cheers.
Cheers.
Got to stay hydrated as we get through the doctrine. Today, what we wanted to... We have a lot of information that we want to bring to everyone. And
Too much.
It's so much. But we're going to break it down a piece at a time. And one thing that we both felt pretty compelled to talk about is the gathering of Israel. And basically what we're going through today is the fact that when we talk about the gathering of Israel, everyone seems to have this idea that we're talking only about the spiritual gathering of Israel. So... missionaries going out and finding people to teach, talking to your neighbors and your friends about the gospel of Jesus Christ, and trying to spread the gospel to people and bringing the gospel into their lives, being sort of that's what most people consider as the gathering, I think, when they hear about that. And that is true. That is part of the gathering of Israel. Technically, we're all going to be, if not actual members of the house of Israel, adopted in. Therefore, it's a spiritual adoption into the house of Israel. But one thing that I think a lot of people miss, and we want to go through today, is the fact that there is a spiritual gathering and that there is also a literal gathering of Israel. So that's where we're going.
All right, so I'm just going to start by reading some things about the gathering that President Nelson has been talking about recently, pretty much in every talk that he does. He covers it in some fashion. The doctrine of the gathering of Israel has captured President Nelson's attention for more than 36 years as he has served as an apostle. He said during the October 2020 General Conference, anytime we do anything that helps anyone on either side of the veil to make and keep their covenants with God, we are helping to gather Israel. And then he said, the gathering is the most important thing taking place on earth today. President Nelson told youth during a worldwide devotional in 2018, inviting them to enlist in the Lord's Youth Battalion to gather Israel. This gathering should mean everything to you. This is the mission for which you were sent to earth. That's really powerful.
And you look at presidents throughout time, prophets, they always seem to have sort of a niche.
A thing.
And one of the most obvious ones to me, because I sort of think of him as my prophet, because when I was on a mission, he was my prophet. President Hinckley, he was the temple builder. So President Hinckley's the temple builder. You got President Monson, who's the rescuer. He's all about rescuing the one. And you think of him and the 80 widows or whoever from his ward as a bishop. He took care of them throughout his entire life. He was the rescuer.
Yeah.
And all these prophets, they sort of seem to have a niche, something to remember them by. I think that President Nelson's might be the gathering of Israel.
It seems to be. And I think it's actually fascinating and interesting that he's focusing on this now. It's a very pertinent time.
Why? Why now?
Why? Maybe, just maybe because we're really close to when it all comes to
a head. Yeah. When it's... we are called the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints for a very specific reason. And I don't think there's no doubt between us and no doubt between a lot of people that we are at the end of that Latter-day Saint period.
The end of the end.
The end of the end.
Yeah.
And we don't mean that in a horrible way. We mean that in an exciting and, amazing way.
Look forward to it.
We've seen President Nelson enact things that have shown us that that's the case. Things like bringing to us the Come Follow Me program right before we have a worldwide pandemic that forces us out of our chapels and out of our churches into learning in a home-based environment. We just happened to get Come Follow Me right at the right time.
Like in my whole life, church has been 3 hours.
Mm-hmm.
And that is just massive change. 2 hour church all of a sudden was like, yes.
Yeah.
In a good way, though. I mean, it's great. It's awesome. And then it's the program that came along with it is awesome. But just amazing change. Like, and I mean, church has actually changed. I learnt this by talking to some older members in ward council and things, and they talked about it when they were like younger. Church was like, You'd go to sacrament on Sunday. You'd actually go to your other meetings during the week. It was actually way different. But
young men's, young women's, different days of the week.
Yeah, but to me, church has always been 3 hours on a Sunday. So this, it's very fascinating to me that these changes are happening, and the timing was amazing with COVID.
That happened before COVID, right?
Yeah.
So everyone's scratching their heads going, why do we move down to 2? Why are we moving to this home-based learning environment? Why are we relying on ourselves and our families rather than the leadership of the church? And then, bang, COVID-19 hits, and we are forced into doing that.
Yeah.
Oh, wow, what a coincidence. Anyway, I think what's clear is President Nelson, prophet, seer, and revelator, obviously he sees and knows and understands the things to come, or has the ability to, right? Not everything. He doesn't know what the Powerball is. But what he can do is he can prepare us for what's coming. And it's very, very interesting that President Nelson has been talking about in a lot of his talks and a lot of his discussion with the members of the church, that one of the things that's fascinated him throughout his whole life is the gathering of Israel. Very interesting timing.
He's the man for it.
So, Articles of Faith number 10. We believe in the literal gathering of Israel, literal gathering of Israel, and in the restoration of the 10 tribes, that Zion, the New Jerusalem, will be built upon the American continent, that Christ will reign personally upon the earth, and that the earth will be renewed and receive its paradisiacal glory. Why is it so? I mean, it's interesting. There's so many points in this that are interesting to me.
So many points in just that.
The New Jerusalem.
We're going to be talking about that we're going to be talking about that a bit now, but we're going to be covering a lot of these points. And we'll do them in some other videos. They're too long. But, there's so many points in just this short couple of lines that I think we gloss over them all the time. Literal gathering of Israel. Restoration of the 10 tribes. Not gathering of the 10 tribes. Restoration.
Yep. So they were scattered.
They were lost.
Physically.
Physically.
We're not talking about... This is not story time with the tribes. They were actually tribes of people.
Kingdoms.
And they were
full kingdoms of people.
And they were actually removed from their place. And they were not just scattered, but they were led. Right? So they're in a body. They've been led. And they need to be restored. So, which means literally in a body restored.
Yep.
That's very interesting.
But what we're focusing mainly on in this video is the literal gathering of Israel. Literal. These things I don't think anyone really thinks about them. We just, kids in primary are singing this song and reciting this, and we learn it all the way, but we never really think about what it's actually talking about.
And I think one of the reasons why that is because we don't have our leadership spell it out for us. The scriptures are a treasure to us because we can open them up, we can read through them, we can understand them, we can comprehend them, we can break them down, and we can find the treasure. We can find all this stuff. It's not necessarily a day-to-day requirement to understand this for your day-to-day salvation, right? Which is one of the reasons why they don't just come out and tell it to us. But it is a beautiful piece of doctrine that if you seek for it, you can find. So when they're telling us, encouraging us to read our scriptures, it is for a reason. There are beautiful pieces of doctrine in there, like the fact that the gathering of Israel is literal, that you could totally gloss over your entire life. So I hope when we go through some of these things, people start to understand and appreciate this. And most importantly, and we will continue to say this time and time again, do your own scripture study. Pray about these things. Research them. Try and find these things out for yourself, because we're not here to
listening to people talk on the internet is great, and it's awesome and it's fantastic. But it won't actually profit you anything. You need to study it for yourself. You need to learn for yourself. If you don't do it yourself, I think David A. Bednar said something recently. I'll get the quote actually. It's really, really good. So he said, "If all you or I know about Jesus Christ and his restored gospel is what other people teach or tell us, then the foundation of our testimony of him and his glorious latter-day work is built upon sand. We cannot rely exclusively upon or borrow gospel light and knowledge from other people, even those whom we love and trust." And that's from a talk in April 2019. So what we're trying to say there quickly is we're sharing stuff, but don't take our word for anything. Please study it for yourself. And that's it.
Straightforward.
Yep.
All right. I want to get into a little story, something that I got into on my mission. So I served in China Hong Kong mission, and one of the amazing things that we got to participate in is seeing some of these martial arts monks to do all the martial arts. And so at the beginning of my mission, we went over to this island, and that's where they had their monastery. And we just rocked up one day, and they were there, and they had a full-on performance there. So they were running at each other and hey-ya! And doing backflips and like balancing on their head and
All the cool
nunchucks
stuff.
and all the cool stuff.
Yep.
And it was the most amazing thing ever. And I was like, man, how cool is it to be at their monastery while they're doing all this martial arts?
I think the correct term is monk house.
Monk house. we're hanging out their monk house, and they're doing all their monk style stuff. It was the coolest thing. Then towards the end of the mission, we got together as a mission. It's a small mission. We got together as a mission and went to a theater, and the same group of monks were at the theater performing. And again, the most amazing thing ever, them balancing on 4 dudes' shoulders and triple front flips and, again, jumping on their heads and stuff, all stuff that I can't do. It was awesome.
Why are you telling us this?
Why are we talking about these flying monks? Because I think that the performance in both locations was the same.
Mm-hmm.
It was just as awesome seeing them at the monastery as it was seeing them in the theatre. So they could take their skill and they could apply that skill anywhere they went. But why was the monastery so important for these monks? The monastery is the place that they actually learnt these skills. They honed them. They lived together. They ate, slept, trained, did everything together. So whilst they could go out anywhere and do their thing, they still needed a place to gather and be together in order to learn and grow and understand.
Well, they could only learn it together as well.
That's for them. That would be the only way they could really have that synergy together. Mm-hmm. You can't go and learn how to do a front flip on someone's head if you've never seen the guy. Mm-hmm. And I think the same thing goes for the gospel. You can go out and be spiritual anywhere. You can go out and teach anywhere. You can go with the missionaries and teach anywhere, be spiritual anywhere. But that doesn't discount the fact that there is always going to be a need for some kind of group structure where we get together and we learn together and we're spiritual together. So, there's a scripture that says that all things are spiritual before they are physical. So all laws and all commandments and everything are actually spiritual commandments and spiritual laws rather than physical. And I think it's important to understand that when we're talking about the literal gathering of Israel, we're not trying to explain to people that you must quickly flee to the mountains, you must quickly flee to your caves and that sort of thing in a group-like structure in order to be gathered and therefore saved. Try and forget that for a second. Here's the way that I see it. Any time that there has been a spiritual gathering, okay, being people sharing the gospel one to another, any time in history, we're talking ancient history, more modern history, 1800s, 1900s, even until today, there has always been a physical gathering that's associated with the spiritual. You can't spiritually gather with people, pretty much, and then not get together in a body. It generally doesn't happen. So here's a little line that I've written down that I hope you can appreciate. It says, I believe that the physical gathering is a natural progression that comes as we gather ourselves spiritually. So as we're trying to be one with Jesus Christ, as we're trying to follow his example, be like him, I think we can't help but gather.
We're told to stand in holy places and be not moved. We hear that a lot lately. And so President Nelson actually recently, I should have looked up when this was actually, but it doesn't matter. In one of his recent conference talks, he said, it is easier to build a temple than it is to build a people prepared for a temple. So in regards to what we're talking about, we're also sort of thinking along the lines of it's easier to build Zion, the physical location, than it is to get a Zion-ready people. That's the problem. That's always been the problem.
That commitment to the gospel, the keeping of the commandments, the turning away from the things of the world for things of a spiritual nature. What's harder than doing? I mean, maybe we're natural men here, but what's harder than turning away the natural man and turning away the temptations of the world and turning away all that stuff and turning to Heavenly Father and doing that on a consistent basis? It's the narrow road. It's not the broad road. It's the narrow road that leads back to our Father in heaven. And
this is why we need to gather together, because it's way harder to do that alone.
Exactly.
By yourself, whatever. we need to be gathered together to support each other and build each other up, and like those monks, do it together. You can't do it alone. It's actually not
what
possible.
wards are for, and
Yeah.
stakes
So
are for,
no, well, I
and
mean, they're great.
it's not what they're for. It's exactly what they're for. That's exactly what they're for.
Just quickly, the focus may not be seeking out the holy places. It is seeking to become a holy people, and holy people make holy places. So I mean, do people make places holy, or do holy places make people holy? And I think definitely people make places holy, except for the temple. I mean, but you have to be already kind of worthy to go to the temple.
Speaking in generalities,
speaking generally, it's
you don't just build a chapel and then say it is now holy. Holy people enter that place. They bring with them the Spirit of God. They make that place holy.
I mean,
as a body.
They're dedicated and things, but those places are holy because we make them holy. And what I really want to mention is our homes, and that's what the president and all the leaders of the church right now are hammering to us constantly, is that your home needs to be holy.
Especially because that's where we can be right now.
That's where we are most of the time,
Talking about COVID-19 and all the other issues and the issues that are to come. Again, President Nelson's seeing all these things in advance, but those things that are to come, it's going to mean that our houses have to be the most holy.
Yeah.
It's the one place we're going to count on actually being with our families.
Yeah.
Other places we might not be able to count on in times to come.
You literally, it's where your family is. It's where you spend most of your time is at home. I mean, half between work, half between home, whatever it is. But what happens if COVID was just the start? What if we end up spending a lot more time there? Again, it needs to be almost the most sacred place you can have.
Yeah.
So we need to focus on that.
We don't even need to speculate too much on what could happen. All we need to do is say, the prophet of the church, prophecy and revelators told us that we need to make our houses holy. Right? And when we do it. And then the consequences of that, we accept.
Yeah.
Because if we're trying to do the right thing, then whatever happens, we'll be blessed for it.
It's never going to be a waste of time, is it?
It's not going to be a waste of time. So here's what we want to get into. All throughout history, all throughout time, people have sought to make themselves holy, and that has led to a physical gathering of people. The same way that you and I try and make our homes holy, the same way that you and I are going to try and go to churches on Sunday, we gather in wards and stakes. All throughout the history of man, have men gathered in order to become a spiritual and holy people. Just as we've said. We're going to run through some of those examples anciently now. All
right, so we're just going to go through some examples of people who have gathered together physically. So starting with the Book of Mormon, we're going to talk about Lehi and his family leaving Jerusalem. Obviously, I guess the way we're going to talk about this is what would happen if they didn't do this. Lehi and his family were commanded to leave Jerusalem. We have the whole Book of Mormon because of it. Which is the basis of our whole entire religion. So huge, that's a huge keystone. That's a huge...
It's a foundational point.
It's a foundational point, yeah. So if they didn't obey, they would have been destroyed in Jerusalem like everyone else, 600 BC. So really important.
Yeah. So they were led away, and they were led to, not just into the wilderness to be together, they were led to a promised land. So had they not chosen to follow the Lord and gather, we would have missed out on the Book of Mormon for future generations. They would have missed out on their own promised land. They would have been destroyed in Israel.
And they were blessed. And they were also punished when they, that's another really good point is obviously...
Obedience.
Obedience and the blessings. And if you don't obey, we have a very clear record of what happens in those situations.
We do. Another one of them was what happened to the Jaredites. So the Tower of Babel came crumbling down. The languages of the people were confounded and mixed up, and no one could communicate one to another. And the Lord led a group of righteous people away. And we have the story of Jared, the brother of Jared, the Jaredites. And again, they were moved in a body to their promised land, which is, again, in the Americas, just like the Nephites.
Yep. So the city of Enoch, which I think is probably going to be one of our most focal points here, the ideal example, essentially, and
one of the few that just
one of the few. So and does God change? Does he not still to cover the city of Enoch? Firstly, obviously Enoch was a prophet. He built a city called Zion, and everyone there was so righteous. too righteous, in fact, that God removed them from the earth, right?
He couldn't keep them there anymore.
Yeah, they were actually so righteous that he couldn't even hold them back, basically. So now God doesn't change, right? He wants that for everyone, right? So how do we become like the city of Enoch, the people of Enoch, right?
And were they gathered together?
No.
I mean, it's not like to be a people of Enoch. Some of the people of Enoch were actually in Northern Africa. Some of the people of Enoch were they're in Australia, and they were just collectively taken up because
listen to YouTube videos.
In the Isles of the Sea, the city of Enoch was collectively somehow pulled together and taken up. Maybe some of that happened, but what we do know about the city of Enoch, as far as I'm aware and you're aware, is that they were taken up in a body because together there was no wickedness among them. They were able to be completely righteous because every man cared as much about his neighbor as himself.
Yep.
And therefore, Heavenly Father couldn't withhold any blessings from them. And they were so righteous that he's like, you know what? Take you up to heaven.
It's that single-mindedness, which you can't have if you're not together.
Yeah.
It's you can't all think the same. You can't have that togetherness if you're not actually together. Yeah. Yeah.
We couldn't be doing this if we weren't together. Now, that's not necessarily true. We could be doing it because of technology at a distance.
Yeah.
And I still, there's still that ability.
It's not the same. Yeah.
It's not the same. We can get together through whatever means it takes, and we can have this discussion. The city of Salem, the ancient city of Salem, when Melchizedek, was high priest of Salem. Again, same thing as city of Enoch. So righteous that they were just removed.
Yeah.
Yep.
We should probably just cover these ones quicker, right?
Yeah.
We're thinking about Noah and Moses, right? Two massive examples. If Noah didn't build the ark, what would have happened? Game over.
literally,
the whole earth. So, we're talking that would have really frustrated the plan. But God always finds a way, right? So, if Noah didn't build his ark and get his righteous family on there, it would have been game over from day one. And then Moses, the examples of Moses, there's tons of them, but simply if Moses was leading Israel away from Egypt, if he didn't part the sea, game over for the Lord's righteous people, essentially. As disobedient as they were.
So what we're getting at is, throughout this list that we're giving of ancient examples of where people were led together, what if they'd chosen not to gather together?
What happens?
In a lot of these circumstances, they'd not only not spiritually gather, like they'd not be able to spiritually work with each other, a lot of them would actually have been destroyed entirely.
Yeah.
This is some ancient examples.
And we're not trying to focus on the punishments of disobedience or not listening and stuff, and probably, hopefully, but you can't say, hopefully if this ever happens to us and this is our thing that we need to do, if we need to gather more somewhere else, I'd hope that we're not talking about being destroyed or something, but the pattern seems awfully constant, doesn't it?
There's something to the pattern of that. And not just that, but there's different ways to die. Yeah. And spiritual death
is worse.
Is one of them. And so if we're not able to gather and we're not able to commune with each other, we're not able to learn and testify, and which is what all the scriptures are teaching us to do. If we can't do that, we're probably going to die, a lot of us spiritually anyway. Are people not already spiritually dying now?
Yeah, it's crazy.
Because they're choosing not to gather together one with another and discuss the gospel. And
it's sad and scary, but also expected.
Yeah. So we'll move. A lot of those were some ancient examples of gathering. Let's talk about some of the more new ones, more modern ones in our church history. Okay, so we've got the saints. The saints. How often did the saints move from one location to another? They moved from in New York State, and a lot of the reason for that was persecution. They moved to Ohio. Again, where they were heavily persecuted. They moved to Missouri, which at the time was the absolute edge of the United States of America, the far west.
Man, it was Indians on the other side.
And were the people there happy to see them?
No.
And so they've been persecuted and kicked from one place to another, then to Nauvoo, and then from Nauvoo kicked again to Salt Lake.
And you just think about for a second how hard it would be for them, time after time, to be kicked out of. Imagine losing everything you own on a regular basis, and thinking, why is God doing this to us? He's telling us to do this, or the prophet's telling us to do this, and this keeps happening. That is faith testing, man. That is hardcore.
And several times throughout that history of these people moving, the ones that had decided to stay behind a lot of them had died spiritually. A lot of them had died physically.
Yeah.
The saints narrowly escaped getting out of Nauvoo in time, in secret, whilst the mobs were combining to come and take that city out.
The amount of stories of times when the saints obeyed and they were protected is crazy. And then there's a few sad times where they didn't.
Yeah. So if they didn't get out in a lot of these circumstances, could there have been a spiritual gathering for them? In a lot of these circumstances, unfortunately, there wouldn't have been a spiritual gathering. So the physical ability to get together and at sometimes, if needed, escape it was needed for their own progression, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so following all these scriptural examples, ancient scriptural examples and more modern times examples, the question then is there for us today or in the future, is there a gathering place? Beyond just our home, our ward, our stake, is there like a gathering place for us? Is there like some kind of gathering that's going to take place?
There is. Surprise answer.
Tell me more.
So, hopefully, most people who are watching this already know what we're talking about and can probably already see where we're headed with this. But so the gathering place in our generation is Zion. Back at Articles of Faith 10, Zion, the New Jerusalem, will be built upon the American continent. So, the New Jerusalem has already been dedicated. The spot has been dedicated by. I don't know if it was Joseph Smith, but anyway, the presidency of the church did dedicate the spot, and it's in Jackson County, Missouri, or Independence, and so that is our Zion.
So that's still the spot.
And
so even though it was dedicated back in the 18 whatevers by those early members of the church, and has since changed ownership and changed hands, and
it's not even currently owned by our church.
Okay,
right? But does that make God a liar? Does that make him wrong? No, and is it still the spot? Yes.
It's still the place.
It will not be. It is not Salt Lake City. The reason we're covering this a little bit is because people are sort of getting complacent, I feel, and wanting to sort of say, oh, look, Salt Lake City maybe now, or the Everlasting Hills or whatever they want to call it is now the New Jerusalem. Sort of trying to sort of say that Zion's already built and already there, but it isn't. Mm-hmm. Look, I would love it to be. I would love it if that was the case. Cool, great.
It'd all be done, signed, sealed, delivered. We know where to go. We'd hit up Salt Lake City. It's already overrun with our members of our church. It'd be a piece of cake. But Zion is not to be removed from her place.
Yep.
That place in Missouri has been designated and set apart and ordained to be the place for the New Jerusalem to be one of the two final headquarters of Jesus Christ's kingdom in the last days. The New Jerusalem in the American continent.
And the old.
And the old Jerusalem. And so that is not going to change.
No. And so the reason we're talking about this, it won't necessarily mean, and we've hammered all these examples and we've talked about all these things about obeying and following and gathering, and it's not even to talk about it as in we all need to necessarily gather there. It's not even big enough for the whole church to even gather there. But what we're trying to say is be ready to qualify if you are called to gather there. Mm-hmm. And the reason that Zion, the New Jerusalem, is important, it's actually a keystone of all the end times events. There's so much prophecy that's yet to be fulfilled. We're going to do a lot more videos about all these things. We haven't covered like 100th of what we even want to talk about. Mm-hmm. This is so surface, so high level. It's just scratching the surface. But the New Jerusalem is a key component. It is essential to all the end times things. It's where the lost 10 tribes will return to. It is where the 144,000 will be sealed.
And called from to go hunt out the righteous. Yep.
And the seventh seal and all these things, like Adam on Diamond's happening very close to there. Mm-hmm. There's so many things that happen all around to do with this. And so what we're trying to say is God has this pattern. He always has. We've just gone through a couple of examples, but if you look at all of the stories...
the scriptures are literally example after example after example of a gathering. And that's literally what we're consistently talking about, is the gathering of Israel. Yes, it is spiritual, but there's also a literal aspect to it. Articles of Faith number 10.
Yeah.
It's such an insane
And
thing.
our job is to qualify to be worthy of Zion.
And that is why it wasn't built in the 1800s. The people weren't fully prepared and qualified for the place to be built.
Yep.
They weren't the holy people prepared for the holy place.
Yep.
They could have built the place,
Yep.
but they did not have
God's
the people.
not wrong. God's not a liar. He doesn't make mistakes. He puts the people. It's like you can take the horse to water. You can't make it drink. God puts the people in this situation, but he can't force them to do what he wants. That removes agency. Moses, he took the Israelites to the promised land, which for them was the land of Canaan. And there were giants there, and they were scared, and they couldn't do it. They had just seen so many amazing things, but they still didn't have the faith to do it. So they had to wander in the wilderness for 40 years. God can get you to that point, but he can't force you to do it. God's not wrong. They still ended up going to the promised land. It just took a while longer because they weren't worthy of it, weren't ready, weren't obedient. And that's our job.
That's a perfect example. So if we want to see the New Jerusalem to be built in our time, if we want to see it being built and us being eligible to enter or to go, whether we do or we don't, it's irrelevant. But if we wanted to be that person, we have to become a Zion people, right? It's not the passive worship that some people are accustomed to.
It requires a lot more of us to be Zion worthy. There is more things that are going to be required of us. That's a whole other conversation, but
which we will get into.
Life is technically easy for us right now.
Here's something that I want to share with you guys. All over the whole world at the moment, members of our church, non-members, people that are Christian and otherwise, are really starting to wake up. They're waking up to the times that we're in. We are in the end of the end times. They're having spiritual experiences. They're seeing visions. They're seeing dreams. They're seeing amazing things. We are of the belief that God is no respecter of persons and he loves his children equally. He is going to come to us as he comes to them. He's going to warn them and protect them and try and bring them to the light, essentially. And we're in a time when everyone's waking up, and we've had our own wake-up experiences we'd love to share in a future video. But we're being woken up and inspired to get ready for the things to come.
Yeah.
And we need to prepare ourselves to become a Zion people, so that whether we do or we don't gather in the New Jerusalem, that we are prepared at least in our homes, at least in our wards, at least in our stakes, so that we can be the type of people, like the city of Enoch, that is so worthy and so righteous that not only do we avoid all the calamities that can come forth, but that we can end up getting called home to him in righteousness. So some things to ponder.
The point is, God, again, he's not wrong. He's tried to build Zion once. They were commanded to, and it didn't go down. He will again. He wasn't wrong, just like the Israelites, right? So we need to be worthy of that when the time comes. So the last couple things that we want to put for you, people who are watching this video, we want you to seek to understand the gathering of Israel more fully. Don't settle at just share the gospel. Yes, obviously that's super important. But it is bigger than that. It is bigger than the content in this video as well, which is why we keep saying study it for yourself. We've only scratched the surface again. This is so high level. We've barely mentioned any actual doctrine. We're just talking. So we will probably do that in future videos. But the second thing is we want you to seek to understand how you can prepare and improve yourself now to become a Zion people, because we have to be a Zion people for Zion to exist.
Pretty simple.
And it's a crazy time we live in. So many people are going less active or whatever. And it is to be expected. And I think that's going to get worse. Judging from the scriptures and from prophecies and things, I dare say that's going to be worse. It's going to be
and the world's morality and everything moves in one direction, and ours stays in the same position, right? So that divide is getting so wide that we're going to come to a time where
it's going to be too hard. It's going to be hard.
You're either on the one side or you're on the other, and it's a choice you're going to have to make, and it's not going to be an easy one. And if you haven't been preparing now, when the time comes to try and jump that chasm as it gets wider and wider, you might not be able to make that jump.
Yeah, so make the choice now.
Make it now.
And start getting on that path, that straight and narrow path, so that you can be prepared for when the Saviour does come, for when Zion is established. Again, you may not even be asked to go there, but you still need to be worthy of it. Yeah. Because there are going to be higher laws and things that we're required to live, which we'll go into in another video as well. We need to strive to be worthy to dwell in his presence and experience the blessings and promises he has in store for us. And that's what we want you to get from this video.
Yeah. So I just want to testify that I believe that these things are true. I believe that the gathering has been bigger for me than I've understood in the past. And I'm grateful to have learnt more about it and understood it more fully. I know that there is a literal gathering of Israel to the New Jerusalem. and I don't know if I'm part of it, but
We're in Australia, so
we're probably not going to have anything to do with it,
Yeah.
and that doesn't matter. But what we want to be is the Zion people where we are, so that we're eligible for the entry, so that if at any time we are called to go, or anyone's called to go, it doesn't fail because of us, and we can make our homes, and we can make our stakes, strengthen our stakes, and become a Zion people where we are, so that no matter what happens, we can have the protection and the peace and the comfort, and eventually, hopefully, return to live with our Father in heaven, in heaven again. So I know that those things are true.
Yeah. Me too. There's so much to say, but the gospel is true. We love it, and this is why we're spending time to share it. Just some things that are important to us. There's going to be a lot more. Again, this is just scratching the surface, and we're looking forward to sharing a lot of things that we want to talk about with with all of you. And so we love the gospel, and we have experienced many blessings by living it, and we look forward to the future, the times that will come. Zion. A lot of cool things are in the future. A lot of crazy things, a lot of scary things too, probably. But that's why we are striving to qualify for Zion, so that we don't have to be afraid.
Well said. Well said. That's from your favorite two brothers. Two brothers. Just two brothers. So that's it from us today. Thanks to everyone for listening, and subscribe and
keep an eye out. There'll be way more videos.
Hit the subscription bell, and as new videos come up, we'll share them with you. Thanks for your time.